everyone. So thanks for joining. My name is Mika Honkasalo, and I work on Access Protocol, which is basically a new way for digital media publications and creators to monetize their online content. With me today, I have Mitchell Moose from Crypto Briefing, CEO of Crypto Briefing, and Mike McCaffrey, the CEO of The Block. And both of them are working with us as launch partners on Access Protocol, and will be integrating Access Protocol into their subscriptions and paywalls. But that is not the main topic here. The main topic here for us is just subscriptions, paywalls, and overall what the media industry and landscape looks like and how Web3 may impact that. So just to get us started and to understand maybe the premise a bit better, Mike, can you give us just an overview of where you see the state of online media nowadays?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for moderating the panel, and good to see some old friends. It's bleak. It's really, really bleak, honestly. Digital media has taken a hit across the board. There's looming decline in ads in 2023. Consumers aren't showing really a lot of interest in your typical consumer subscriptions. That's reflected in everything from Netflix to the Washington Post and so on and so forth. And so honestly, we've seen some of that as well on the consumer side, which is why we were more willing to kind of experiment with something like Access Protocol. Even just on, I think it was Thursday or Friday, Business Insider had announced that they're taking content that otherwise would have been behind a paywall and putting it in front of their paywall now, noting that there isn't going to be as much acquisition through that content otherwise. And so Access, and I know that's not really the topic, is a way in which it's really like an alternative paywall, alternative subscription layer that changes how the consumer and the creator connect. And so, like Mika mentioned, the Block's participating in this experiment as is Crypto Briefing. So.
And where do you, in particular, see the problems with these businesses? Like why, Mitchell, are these are very famous names, like Bloomberg and Landing. These are all the big names. They're very culturally important, but the business model just doesn't seem to match that. Where do you think that comes from, and what the issue is there?
Well, there's just so many problems with content production that a lot of these publishers are getting absolutely crushed. One of the main issues is the control and monetization of that intellectual property. So when someone like The Block or a Bloomberg puts out a piece of content, does a lot of the labor in terms of the investigations, getting the sources, and everything else, then usually you'll see lots of other media companies copy that content and produce it on their own website to get the coattails of that traffic. And you also see this between print media and TV media as well, where you'll see a print publication or a newspaper do a lot of investigative work into writing a story, and then a TV station will talk about it, get the traffic from it, the ad dollars from that, and then only give a little bit of attribution back to the original publisher. So that monetization chain beyond just attribution is what needs to be really scrutinized, is because just saying, hey, the source was XYZ publication is not sufficient for these publishers to really get paid for the hard work that they're doing in this content that's in the public interest.
And maybe then looking at your businesses, because both of you, this is a very untraditional industry, crypto, but you run a very traditional business in a way, media business. How are your own business models structured based on this, and what have you sort of learned from traditional media? What are you trying to learn from Web3 that you could bring into your business? Maybe starting from Mike.
Yeah, sure. I can talk about a little bit about the Block's evolution here. So initially we had just ads in our newsletter on site. That's super standard. We moved into what is like a business-to-consumer subscription. So the consumer was paying, say, $1,000 per year for a research product. And we learned a lot from that experience in particular, and pretty much decided the consumer subscription models are really hard. And so we moved over to the B2B side, which is a totally different kind of client experience, how you service, who's actually paying, and have seen way more success there, and there have been examples of other companies who've done that at scale, like Politico with their Politico Pro product, as well as Freightwaves and a couple others. And so despite thinking that the B2B way of content monetization is probably better, we still wanted to serve, our consumers, right? Because we, as a firm, take the stance like we have an important responsibility to say educate like the masses on what is happening in crypto in a very consistent way. And so, how do we afford to do that without kind of like putting up as large of like a paywall that people don't want to really interact with, right? Like even, you don't want, say, 10 subscriptions that are $200 per year. You really only want like 3. However, you probably want access whenever you actually run into a paywall to all of these different publishers.
Maybe you can actually elaborate a little bit like on just, I know you have a couple of data points on just how inefficient like these subscriptions are, like, and what the audience penetration rates tend to be, and why that's like such a bad business.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we were kind of like doing research into do we want to say participate in this experiment, what was important was looking at like best-in-class players and how successful they've been in terms of their, we'll call it like audience penetration. So how many users are actually pulling out their credit card and paying for content versus the number of monthly actives they have visiting their site. And it's pretty abysmal, right? New York Times is best in class by miles, and they're, say, 6.4%, I think, is like what they're citing right now. They have hundreds of millions of monthly active users. Well, that's probably high. We'll call it 100. And only, 6 million or so are actually paying for them. And again, that's best in class, and most publishers only see something like a 0.1% to like 0.6% penetration rate. And so like that fact alone just kind of irked me in the wrong way, because I'd want like everyone to actually have access to the content, and the suggestion that only 6% in best case scenarios wasn't something that we would get like super excited for.
Okay, I think that explains the problem very well. So when we talk about the future of media and potentially the impact crypto and Web3 may have on it, like what are just the different options that you've seen at Crypto Briefing, that the different monetization models you could adopt, like what have been good things about them, what have been bad things about them, like how do you think about what you would integrate into your own business?
Yeah, the most obvious one is advertising, and most media companies start with this advertising model, but there's a significant moral hazard with this. Like you already heard about the flack that Facebook and Google have gotten into for basically turning their users into the product. They're the ones that are being sold rather than the ones that are being served. And this is a major problem with media companies where trust is paramount of importance. So for Crypto Briefing's evolution, it was quite similar to the blocks, but for the first 2 years, we didn't accept any advertising dollars at all. So Crypto Briefing was founded in the heart of 2017 during the bull market, where trust was at an all-time low in different media companies because there was a lot of pay-to-play action, like undisclosed shilling of projects, and just people just doing backroom deals to shill complete garbage ICOs. So Crypto Briefing tried to buck that trend by not accepting any advertising dollars at all and just financing it against market share, hoping that at some point in the future that we'd develop a subscription product, which we eventually did. So we did also launch a consumer subscription. It started out like $1,000 a year, just providing different insights and due diligence into different crypto projects. And what we're starting to realize is much what Mike mentioned earlier, is that those penetration rates are so low that it's still difficult to monetize like a media business that way. So imagine using Access Protocol rather than this dirty word of a paywall, and I actually don't like that Access Protocol calls it a tokenized paywall. It's a get paid wall. So people will actually get paid for getting access to these subscriptions using the Access token. And I think that's a really novel and innovative way to be able to simplify the overall subscription process and incentivize users to actually engage with this content in a way that's native to Web3.
When we were building Access Protocol, I think the most common other approach that we saw to this problem was like some sort of just Web3 login wallet with like maybe a USDC payment or something like that, or then something around NFTs, which actually, when you think about it, looks quite similar. So, what do you think were the problems with something like that? This is both of you, problems with those ideas versus like something like what we're building.
I don't think an NFT is an improvement over the old school subscription model. Like now, you just have the ability to resell access to that subscription when that media companies usually minting many subscriptions at a time. And you've seen a couple other like DAOs try this NFT content access model and fail, like DuckDAO or LobsterDAO, which are like investment organizations. And they minted out a certain number of NFTs, and only that group of people would get access to this content in this community. But eventually, because of issues with managing like a distributed content community and network, those places just kind of collapsed in on themselves, and it made it very difficult to maintain the integrity and quality of that content without some central arbiter of what's truthful and also what's high quality.
Yeah. It's interesting. The NFT side, a lot of different projects have come to us over the years, like, hey, why don't you tokenize the block? Why don't you introduce some form of like micropayments? Like, I'll pay out of my crypto wallet. Like, it's just really tough on both sides of the equation. You as the consumer and the block in this context as like the creator, because there is no kind of like guarantee of like growing streaming fees, and really what everyone wants is that like recurring fees in which you can like really build a business off of. And so the idea of say like counting on secondary transactions of an NFT, it's just a really hard sell for say larger organizations out there. Maybe like the Times at some point would want to change its business model, and NFTs just would be a tough one.
Well, not to mention the added friction, like now you're telling everybody that they have to access your content through an NFT or like load a wallet to pay every time they view a piece of content. Like, that's just not a great user experience. People want it to be convenient and seamless to be able to get access to all this stuff.
I have noticed that like a lot of this is also where people don't really understand like what the solution should be from the publication side. They think about it more from the user side, where like micropayments, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a classic one everyone suggested. No media publication, in my understanding, like really wants that. Can you just talk about why that is?
I don't even think users want that. Like, do you really? If you ever use something called Pacer, I remember doing this as a journalist. It's a government website for accessing court documents. And it sounds a little bit weird, but every time you would download a court document, you would have to pay like 10 or 20 cents to do that. And they'd just rack them all up, and then at the end of it, you'd pay this bill. And even if you access the same document multiple times, because say you lost it or you needed to get it again, you'd pay every single time. That's like, no, that's a horrible user experience, because it's making you do the opposite of what the business wants you to do, which is engage with that content and become part of that, within that part of that community of that media company. And instead, you're incentivizing them to do the opposite, consume as little content as possible and not engage with that content.
You two are both positioned quite well to experiment with this stuff, understand it, and implement it in some way into your business. I think that's still quite a leap from sort of traditional media companies being able to make that jump. What do you think are like the biggest challenges to that, and like what the roadmap looks like? How can we get to a place where some of the world's biggest media companies would be using crypto?
Yeah, I can start off. I think for us, it's just like the UX is such a pain point for a lot of consumers out there, right? Like, if you are to deprecate what is the existing consumer paywall today, you better be damn sure that whatever you introduce is going to be really, really lightweight. And I think that's probably a theme across all of crypto. In order for there to be really big adoption, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people, how do you get people to use crypto without actually necessarily realizing that it's on Solana, it's on Ethereum, or whatever else? Like, that's not what the consumer, the average consumer, would care about. They care about a very, very clean experience, and that's why I think crypto briefing and the block are kind of like critical to iterating here, is because we kind of understand the nitty gritty, are confident about it, and now can like really focus on the UX piece, continuing to improve and improve until it becomes unequivocally clear to say a Times or maybe a TechCrunch or whatever much more seasoned publisher is out there than say like Mitch or I, to implement something like Access, whatever the Web3 solution is. That I'm personally convinced the only way for there to be like really meaningful change to these different business models is through some kind of like Web3 concept. So that's why.
What do you think? How do I push this to like New York Times?
How do you push it?
Yeah.
Just show them the block and crypto briefing as case studies and see how they transform their subscription models that way. Because think about the New York Times. That is their bread and butter, is their subscription. Unless you could come up with a compelling use case to say, hey, here's what these other businesses have done. Here's the results of that. Here's the data to show that it increases user engagement and increases the monetization per impression or per user. Until you have those studies, then maybe the New York Times will start considering and be like, hey, this makes sense.
One last aspect I think I want to touch on is just the on-chain part of this, where like, how do you see just the data that you're able to get? For example, if you have like a system like this where it's just one ecosystem, you can see all the users, like their behaviors, interactions with other publications. Like, what value add is that to your business? Maybe starting from Mike.
Sure. Yeah, data is a really big part of the kind of digital media conversation right now because it's critical to the effectiveness of like the ad units. I know people can be a little allergic to ad units, but in order, they would have so much more efficient monetization if they were able to say, hey, this is Mika Honkasalo visiting the site, right? And so like the introduction of, say, like a better identity layer where you could say, okay, Mitchell's visiting, or this is Mika's visiting, and being able to, say, like, monetize their visits more directly because there is a sponsor out there that wants to get a message in front of Mitchell specifically is super, super duper promising. I think it would totally transform the landscape. One aspect that is pretty cool about like what we could do if everyone onboarded into like a Web3 monetization mechanic is actually the value transfer shouldn't solely be towards the content creator. It should actually go back to the consumer as well, right? Everyone in this room is attacked by hundreds of ads per day as they kind of like surf around the web. Like, you as a user arguably should be compensated for generating impressions on those ads. Like, could you kind of design a system to do that with crypto? And I think the eventual answer is yes.
Ads sort of get a bad rap always, but I mean, if you're able to receive something that's actually valuable to you in a way from your actions that you've done, that's actually good for the user as well, and really good for the business, right?
Yeah, I mean, just imagine if someone could put an ad in front of Sam Bankman-Fried. How much would they pay for that? It'd be in the thousands or tens of thousands, and then giving half of that back to him, say like, hey man, you could donate this to charity or something. That'd be such a cool way to monetize advertising. And doing that in a Web3 native format by trying to link like web behavior with wallets would be really interesting and really cool. And it also poses its own host of interesting and tricky like privacy concerns on ways on how to navigate this actual interaction between people don't want to maintain their privacy while simultaneously advertisers and content producers want to serve content that's relevant and interesting to them.
Yeah, and I do think that's like a common criticism of the ad model, and there are definitely people out there that say like, hey, like we don't need ads online, but like the truth of the matter is like you really, really do. Like that's how the world works. Like people need to sell things, and so naturally want to get them in front of you. But the reason why I think a lot of people hate ads is because they're just presented so many irrelevant ads to what they're interested in. I personally, you know, when I hop on Instagram, I'm not super offended by what's put in front of me. I'm more so creeped out that they know like I need a new mattress or something. And so like if you're able to present a relevant ad every single time, then it's probably good for the consumer, like Mitchell was suggesting.
So if sort of the access protocol and also like other Web3 monetization methods for digital media publications, it goes well, like how do you see that then changing the media landscape and changing what these businesses look like?
Well, I don't think it's just limited to media either. The scope of what Access Protocol can do is just for supporting public goods in general. And this is a common problem that you see across many industries. Like, how does Wikipedia fund its organization? How does the Creative Commons fund its organization? All these different nonprofits and not-for-profits and companies like media companies which produce something that's in the public interest, how do you go about financing that in a way that's good for consumers and good for society overall? So I think that engagement and that interaction between users being able to like stake their tokens towards a project without losing access to those funds and while simultaneously getting rewarded for that is a novel and interesting way to tackle that public goods problem.
We talked actually a lot more about Access Protocol, and I suggest everyone go check out our announcement, Crypto Briefing and Crypto Slate, and also how the protocol works as well. We didn't really get into the details here that much. But yeah, I think thank you everyone very much for joining here on this panel. And thank you, both of you, for giving your thoughts. And yeah, let's see where all this goes.
Yeah, I think all three of us are really, really excited about what the impact of Web3 can be for all of content creators, but in particular, the digital media companies that we run. So, thanks for hosting.
Thanks, everybody.